The first thing Ambassador Vorlag of the Carther smelled was strawberries. It was a strange, sweet scent in the sterile air of the negotiation chamber aboard the orbital station Epsilon. He remembered the smell from the human data packets. A fruit. Small, red, fragile. He swiveled one of his 4 eyes to look at the human delegation. They sat perfectly still, their soft pinkish faces betraying nothing. The disarmament talks had been going on for 3 standard weeks. The Galactic Council, a coalition of 100 starfaring species, had been firm. Humanity, the newcomers, the loud, aggressive, fast-breeding apes from the Sol system, had to surrender their fleet, all of it. General Administrator Thorne, the lead human, had not blinked. He had simply said, "We will consider your request." Now a decision was expected. Vorlag felt a prickle of unease along his chitinous back. The strawberry smell was stronger now, thick and cloying. His translator implant buzzed. A human word formed in his mind, a girl's name, Lily. Where had that come from? He saw a flash of a small human child, with hair the color of suns, laughing in a field of green. Then came the second assault. The faint, ghostly sound of a piano, a simple, clumsy melody. It echoed in the chamber, but it wasn't coming from the speakers. It was inside his head. Vorlag looked at his fellow delegates. The gelatinous form of the Poldorian emissary was quivering violently. The crystalline Zelosian delegate had begun to glow a dull, painful crimson, a sign of extreme distress. The third thing was a feeling of loss so profound, so absolute. It was like a black hole opening in his soul. It was not his loss. It was someone else's. A grief so sharp and personal it felt like a physical blade twisting in his gut. He saw the girl again, Lily, but this time she was small and pale in a white bed, her breath a tiny, fragile cloud. He felt a father's hand holding hers, the rough, calloused skin against the delicate bones. He felt the moment the breathing stopped. Ambassador Vorlag let out a shriek that was not Cathar, not human, not anything but pure, undiluted agony. He clawed at his own face, trying to rip the images out of his brain. Across the table, the human delegation watched, their faces still, their eyes filled with a terrible ancient sadness. The Poldorian emissary dissolved into a puddle of screaming goo. The Zelosian shattered, sending razor-sharp shards of crystal across the polished floor. Vorlag fell to his knees, the name echoing in his skull, over and over. Lily. Lily, Lily. He finally understood. The humans had not brought weapons to this meeting. They hadn't needed to. Sam Weller hated funerals, but he hated the silences afterward even more. The silence in the house was the worst part. It was a physical thing, a heavy blanket that smothered every sound. It had been a year since Lily died, and the silence had only grown thicker. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at a mug of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The news was on the wall screen, the volume muted. Angels of chaos on Epsilon Station. Alien delegates, either dead or insane. The talking heads were using words like human aggression and psychic attack. Sam didn't care. The galaxy could burn for all he cared. It had been burning for him since the day the doctors told him there was nothing more they could do. Leukemia, a word as ugly as the disease it named. Lily had been 7. She had loved the smell of strawberries and played the piano with a clumsy joy that made his heart ache to remember. His comm unit chirped, startling him. It was a restricted government channel. He almost ignored it. but the noise was an intrusion on the sacred silence, and he wanted it to stop. He tapped the screen. A severe-looking woman in a grey uniform appeared. Her name tag read, Director Evans, Colonial Defense Coordination. "Mr. Weller?" she asked, her voice crisp. "Yeah," Sam grunted. "Samuel Weller, formerly Chief, Maintenance Engineer on the Starship Wanderer." "That's me. I am retired." "We're aware of your status, Mr. Weller. We need you to come in. It's a matter of galactic security." Sam almost laughed. Galactic security. He couldn't even secure his own daughter's life. "I am not interested." "This isn't a request, Mr. Weller," Evans said, her eyes narrowing. "A transport will be at your location in 20 minutes. Be ready." The screen went blank. Sam sat there for a long moment. He should have been angry or scared. Instead, he just felt tired. A deep, bone-weary exhaustion that had nothing to do with sleep. He stood up and walked to the mantelpiece. A small, framed photo sat there. It was of Lily, maybe a year before she got sick. She was grinning. A gap where a tooth had been, holding a half-eaten strawberry. He picked it up, his thumb stroking the cool glass. The silence in the house seemed to press in on him, and for a second, just a second, he thought he could smell strawberries. He shook his head, blaming it on memory, on grief. He put the photo down and went to get his coat. The government wanted him. Fine. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. The transport was a sleek, black affair that settled on his lawn without a whisper. The inside was as sterile as a hospital. 2 silent guards in body armor flanked him. No one spoke during the flight. They landed at a sprawling military complex hidden in the Nevada desert. Sam was led through a maze of corridors to a briefing room. Director Evans was there, along with a handful of military and scientific types. A large screen on the wall showed a diagram of the Epsilon Station negotiation chamber. "Mr. Weller," Evans began without preamble, "we've analyzed the incident. The Cathar ambassador, Vorlag, was the last to succumb. His neural implant recorded his final sensory inputs. They were specific." She played a recording, a distorted shriek, and then a garbled voice. "Lily, strawberries, the music, her hand." Sam froze. His blood ran cold. Evans fixed him with a stare that felt like it could see right through his ribs and into his hollowed-out heart. "The Galactic Council is calling this an attack. They've given us an ultimatum. Total disarmament within 1 standard month, or they will enforce it with their combined fleets." "But it wasn't an attack, was it, Mr. Weller? You were a civilian observer on the Wanderer during the First Contact War 10 years ago. You were at the siege of Cygnus X-1, where we lost 30,000 souls." "I was a mechanic," Sam said, his voice hoarse. "I fixed the life support." "You did more than that," a scientist in a lab coat chimed in, his eyes wide with a kind of terrified awe. "We've been going through the records, cross-referencing personnel with anomalous events. Every time a major human tragedy occurs, there are ripples, psychic echoes. The aliens, their minds are different, more orderly, less chaotic. They can't process it. It's like broadcasting a scream into a library. Our grief, Mr. Weller, it's not just an emotion, it's a force of nature. And you seem to be a nexus point." Sam stared at them, his mind reeling. Lily, the strawberries, the piano. It wasn't his memory playing tricks on him. It was his grief leaking out, somehow projected across light years to kill an alien ambassador. The thought was so monstrous, so insane that he felt a bubble of hysterical laughter rise in his throat. "The Council thinks our ships and guns are our power," Director Evans said, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. "They're demanding we give up our weapons. They have no idea what our real power is. And we have no idea how to control it. That's why you are here, Mr. Weller. We need you to help us understand it. Before this thing inside us does us all killed." The world held its breath. The news channels played the Council's ultimatum on a loop. 100 alien species, from the silicon-based architects of the Andromeda local group to the gas giant leviathans of the Triangulum, had all agreed. Humanity was too volatile, too dangerous. Their fleets, born from a history of self-destructive warfare, were a threat to galactic peace. The talking heads debated, pundits argued, politicians gave speeches full of bluster and fear. But in the halls of power, a different, quieter panic was setting in. Sam was housed in a small, grey apartment within the Nevada complex. It was clean, functional, and as soulless as a crypt. They gave him files to read, recordings to listen to. He saw reports of other incidents, small ones, that had been dismissed as alien madness or equipment failure. A Xylosian trade vessel drifting into a star after its pilot started screaming about a burning city called Dresden. A Poldorian science team dissolving into puddles after their ship passed too close to a human colony that had been wiped out by a plague a generation earlier. It was all there, a pattern of madness and death that followed in humanity's wake, not from their guns, but from their ghosts. The ghosts of their history, their pain, their endless, bottomless reservoirs of sorrow. He learned the term the scientists had coined for it: mnemonic resonance cascade, a fancy name for a haunting. Their minds are telepathic, but not in the way we imagine. Dr. Aris Thorne, the lead scientist, explained to Sam one afternoon. They were in a lab that smelled of ozone. They share a low-level, continuous psychic field. It's how they maintain social cohesion. It's calm, orderly, like a perfectly tuned instrument. And then we come along. Aris gestured to a complex brain scan on a monitor. Our minds are noisy. We don't share a field. We're psychic black boxes, each one filled with a lifetime of intense, chaotic, private emotions. Love, hate, joy, and most potently grief. When a human experiences profound loss, it creates a mnemonic echo, a psychic scar. For us, it's just memory, sadness. But for them, he pointed to another scan, this one of a Kantar brain during the Epsilon incident. It's like a direct physical assault. The echo doesn't just get heard, it gets experienced. Ambassador Vorlag didn't just sense your grief for your daughter, Mr. Weller. He felt it. He became you for a moment. He experienced the loss of a child named Lily. Kantar has no concept of such a thing. They reproduce by fission. The shock, the sheer emotional paradox of it, shattered his mind. Sam felt sick. So I killed him. No, Aris said gently. Your grief did. And you didn't direct it. It just is. Like radiation from a star. It's an innate property of our species. The disarmament began. The first ships were flown to a graveyard orbit around Jupiter. Great, proud vessels like the Indomitable and the Starbreaker, ships that had defended Earth and its colonies, were powered down, their crews leaving them to drift in the cold dark. It was a humiliating spectacle. On the news, humanity looked weak, defeated. Director Evans brought Sam to the command center to watch the live feeds. "They think they're deploring the tiger," she said, her arms crossed. "They're focused on the claws, but they don't know the tiger's roar can kill." "What do you want from me?" Sam asked, his voice flat. "We need to know the limits," Evans said. "We need to know the triggers. The Epsilon incident was triggered by the stress of the negotiations, combined with your proximity. But these other events, they seem to be linked to locations, places of great loss." She pulled up a star map. "The Council wants proof we are complying. They want to send observers to the decommissioning of the Wanderer." "Your old ship?" Sam's gut tightened. The Wanderer wasn't just any ship. It had been the flagship at the siege of Cygnus X-1. It had been a hospital ship, a troop transport, and finally a tomb. Thousands had died on its decks. After the war, it had been turned into a floating memorial, its corridors engraved with the names of the fallen. "They want to put their observers on a ship that is essentially a 300,000-ton ghost story," Aris said, his voice grim. "It's a test," Evans stated. "They're not just observing the decommissioning. They're probing us. They suspect something is wrong, something beyond our technology. They want to see what happens." "And you want me there," Sam said. It wasn't a question. "You are our barometer, Mr. Weller," Evans confirmed. "You are more sensitive to this Bart resonance than anyone we've ever found. We need you to go aboard the Wanderer with the Council observers. We need you to tell us what you feel. We need to know what happens when they get close to one of our scars." Sam thought of the Wanderer. He remembered the smell of burnt wiring and antiseptic. He remembered the faces of the young soldiers, full of fear and hope. He remembered the silence in the med bay after a battle, a silence just like the one in his house, a silence full of ghosts. "Fine," he said. Going back there couldn't be any worse than sitting in his kitchen listening to the quiet. At least on the Wanderer, he wouldn't be the only one who was haunted. The journey to the Wanderer was cold and silent. Sam traveled on a small, diplomatic shuttle with 2 Council observers. One was a Zelosian, a crystalline being named Lyra, who communicated through chimes that a translator turned into flat, monotone English. The other was a Kothar, a younger one than Vorlag, named Grak. He stood stiffly in the corner of the shuttle, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, refusing to look at Sam directly. The air was thick with a mixture of alien curiosity and palpable fear. They saw him as a weapon, a loaded gun with a faulty trigger. Maybe they were right. The Wanderer loomed in the viewport, a silent, scarred giant against the swirling backdrop of Jupiter. Its hull was pitted from plasma fire, its engines dark. It was a dead thing. As their shuttle docked, Sam felt the first stirrings of it, a faint hum at the base of his skull, a static wash of feeling that wasn't his own. It was the ship. It was remembering. The docking bay was cavernous and cold. Their footsteps echoed. Emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows. Grak produced a scanner, a silver wand that whirred softly. "The Council requires a full energy spectrum analysis," Lyra chimed, her translated voice devoid of emotion, "to ensure all weapon systems are truly inert." "Be my guest," Sam said, his voice sounding hollow in the huge space. They moved from the bay into the main corridors. Here, the feeling grew stronger. The walls were lined with endless rows of names, etched into the metal. The Roll of the Lost. 32,417 names. Each one a story cut short, a universe of experience extinguished, each one a source of grief for someone, somewhere. A mother, a father, a brother, a wife, a daughter. The static in Sam's head intensified. It wasn't just a hum anymore. It was whispers, fragments of thought, echoes of emotion. Tell Sarah I love her. I am scared. It's so cold. Just want to go home. For the colony, Mum. He stumbled, pressing a hand to the cold wall to steady himself. The metal was vibrating. Not physically, but psychically. He could feel the memory of the men and women who had died right here, in this corridor, defending it from boarders. The sudden sharp shock of pain, the fading confusion, the final lonely darkness. "Are you unwell, human?" Lyra's chimes asked. "I am fine," Sam lied, pushing himself off the wall. "Just ghosts." Grak froze, his scanner held out in front of him. He swiveled his eyes towards Sam. "What did you say?" "A figure of speech," Sam mumbled. But the Carther scanner was beeping erratically. "There are anomalous energy readings," Grak said, his voice a low growl. "Not radiation, not electromagnetic. It is batrada resonant. Faint, but everywhere." They reached the bridge. The view screen was a dead black eye staring out at Jupiter. The command chairs were empty, but the room felt crowded. Sam could almost see them, the phantoms of the bridge crew at their posts. Captain Eva Rostova, her jaw set, giving her final order. The young tactical officer, face pale, reporting hull breaches. The communications specialist, weeping silently as she relayed messages to the families of the dead. The whispers were a roar in his head now, a chorus of last moments. He felt their fear, their resolve, their sorrow. It mingled with his own grief, for Lily amplifying it, twisting it into something immense and powerful. He saw his daughter's face, smiling, then pale, superimposed over the gas giant in the view screen. The smell of strawberries and antiseptic filled the bridge. "The readings are spiking," Grak yelled, taking a step back. "The resonance is coalescing, centered on him." He pointed a trembling claw at Sam. Lyra the Zelosian began to flicker. Her crystalline form, usually a clear, calm blue, was flashing with chaotic pulses of red and violet. "The patterns," her translated voice stuttered. "The patterns are illogical. Pain, love, duty, fear, all at once. It is a paradox. It is breaking the logic. Tam's existence." Sam closed his eyes, gripping the back of the captain's chair. He wasn't just feeling the echoes anymore. He was broadcasting. His own personal, monumental grief for Lily was acting like an amplifier, drawing in the ship's sorrow and focusing it, turning the Wanderer into a massive psychic beacon. He saw it then in his mind's eye. A young soldier, no older than 19, dying on the floor of the engine room, thinking of his mother's apple pie. The image was so clear, so real, that Sam could taste the cinnamon. He felt the boy's life fade, and the grief of the mother, who would receive the news a week later. It was an agony that spanned time and space. Grak let out a choked gasp and dropped his scanner. He was staring at an empty spot near the tactical station. "I see her," he whispered, his mandibles trembling. "The captain, Rostova, she is looking at me." Lyra emitted a long, high-pitched shriek of pure digital noise as her form cracked, a fissure running down her crystalline body. The bridge lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness, save for the swirling clouds of Jupiter outside. In the black, Sam Weller was not alone. He was surrounded by 32,417 souls, and they were all weeping. Ambassador Zila of the High Veroni watched the feed from the Wanderer with a growing sense of dread. His office, a minimalist sphere of softly glowing light strips, felt confining for the first time. The Veroni were a species of pure logic, their society a perfect calculation. Emotion was a primitive flaw they had engineered out of their genetics millennia ago. They did not feel. They assessed. And Zyla's assessment was that the galaxy was in more danger than he had ever imagined. On the main screen, the feed from the Carther observer Grak's suit camera was a mess of static and panicked shrieking. But it was the short, clear fragments that were terrifying. "I see her," Grak had whispered. The captain. The camera had swung wildly to an empty space, but for a fraction of a second, the ship's internal sensors registered a localized temperature drop and a faint EM field shaped, impossibly, like a human female. Then came the Zelosian's end. Lyra's crystalline form was designed to perceive reality as a flow of pure data. The feed from her internal sensors was a cascade of corrupted code, a waterfall of paradoxes. Before she shattered, her last coherent transmission was a single concept, translated from the raw data. A sorrow so large it has gravity. Zyla terminated the feed. He brought up a file marked with the highest security classification. Project Damocles. It contained every scrap of data the Council had on humanity's psychic emanations. It had been a fringe theory until Epsilon Station. Now it was the only theory that mattered. He replayed the final moments from Ambassador Vorlag's neural implant. He filtered out the audio, the screaming, and focused on the raw visual data. He ran it through a Varani deep analysis matrix. The computer worked, cross-referencing the imagery with the human cultural database. The laughing child in the field, the pale girl in the bed, the clumsy piano melody. The matrix returned a result. Not a weapon signature, not a virus. It was a story. A personal tragedy. The computer identified the elements as archetypes of human art and memory. The name, Lily. The scent, strawberries. A fruit associated in human literature with youth and innocence. The melody, a simple tune often taught to children. It was a psychic collage of a father's grief. "They are not projecting a weapon," Zyla said to the empty room. His voice was a calm, synthesized tone, but the logic behind it was screaming an alarm. They are projecting themselves. His aide, a junior functionary named Zen, shimmered into existence at the edge of the room, a hologram of polite inquiry. "Ambassador, the Council demands an update. The Kantar and Zelosian delegations are in chaos. They claim their observers were killed by human ghosts." "They are not wrong," Sila stated. He swiped a hand, sending the Wanderer data to Zen's holographic display. "The human species is fundamentally broken. Their evolutionary path produced self-awareness, but it is coupled with a catastrophic flaw, emotional permanence. Their memories do not fade. Their losses do not diminish. They accumulate." He brought up a map of the human homeworld, Earth. It was dotted with red markers. "We have scanned their planet from orbit. We thought these were locations of high radiation or exotic energy. We were wrong. This one," he pointed to a spot in a region they called Europe, "is the site of a battle where millions died a century ago. This one," he indicated another, "is a city they destroyed themselves with an atomic weapon. The mnemonic resonance in these places is off the scale. They are psychic wounds on the face of their own planet. The Wanderer was merely a mobile version of the same. Zen's hologram flickered. This was information far beyond his clearance. So, their history is a weapon? Number far more dangerous, Zyla corrected. A weapon can be controlled. It can be aimed. This in environment. It is the air they breathe. Imagine, Zen, if every time you recalled a failed calculation, the universe itself shuddered. Imagine if the memory of a statistically insignificant loss could shatter the mind of a bystander. That is the human condition. The Varani had encountered species with psychic abilities before. Telepaths, empaths, precogs. All of them had a degree of control. They were skills to be honed. The humans had no control. They were psychic incontinents leaking their deepest traumas into the fabric of reality. Their grief was a contagion. The disarmament is a mistake, Zyla concluded, the logic irrefutable. We are forcing them to decommission ships. But those ships are the least of our worries. We are trying to take their claws when the real danger is their soul. What is the alternative, Ambassador? Zen asked. The Council consensus is that they cannot be allowed to expand further. Zyla looked at the map of Earth again, at the festering psychic wounds that littered its surface. He thought of the word Lyra, transmitted before she broke. Gravity. A sorrow so large it has gravity. It pulls you in. It warps the space around it. We have been treating a disease as if it were an act of war, Zyla said. The new proposal cannot be for disarmament. It must be for containment. A quarantine. He made a decision. It was logical. It was necessary. It was, perhaps, the only thing that could save the rest of the galaxy from the terrible, beautiful, unbearable sadness of being human. He would send a probe, a shielded Varani probe, to one of those wounds on Earth. He needed to measure the abyss, to understand the full scope of the catastrophe that was human memory. He needed to show the Council a true reading of humanity's power. Only then would they understand the need to build a wall around this small, weeping corner of the universe. Sam was kept in isolation for a week after the Wanderer incident. Doctors and scientists poked and prodded him, scanned his brain, and asked him endless questions he couldn't answer. How did you do it? Can you do it again? What did you see? He told them the truth. He didn't do anything. He just remembered Lily. But something had changed. The Wanderer had opened something in him. The background static of the ship's grief was gone, but now he felt other things, fainter whispers on the edge of his perception. The weary loneliness of the guard outside his door, missing his son's birthday. The quiet desperation of a scientist in the lab down the hall, whose research grant was about to be cut. It was like his own grief had been a tuning fork, and the Wanderer had struck it so hard, it had attuned him to all the other sad songs being played around him. He spent most of his time in his grey apartment, looking at the photo of Lily he'd brought with him. Before, looking at it had been a sharp, private pain. Now, it felt different. When he touched the glass, he felt a jolt, a resonance. It was her, the pure, undiluted memory of her, his love and his loss for her. But it was also something more. It was the echo she had left behind, not just in his mind but in the world. It was a part of the great, sad symphony of humanity. One evening, Director Evans and Dr. Aris Thorne came to his room. They looked grim. "The Council isn't backing down," Evans said, skipping the pleasantries. "The loss of their observers has only made them more determined. They think we sacrificed them to hide a secret weapon." "In a way, they're right," Aris muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. Ambassador Zila of the Varuni has made a new proposal, Evans continued. He's the voice of reason on the council, apparently. He doesn't believe it was a deliberate attack. He believes it's an environmental hazard. He wants to quarantine us, Aris said. Seal off the Sol system. Declare it a no-fly zone for all eternity. He's convinced we're a psychic plague. Sam looked from one to the other. So what? Let them. We'll be left alone. The idea was strangely appealing. No more aliens, no more expectations, just humanity, left to its own noisy, messy, sad existence. It's not that simple, Evans countered. A quarantine is a prison sentence. It means the end of our expansion, our trade, our future among the stars. We'd be a galactic zoo, worse, a leper colony. Zyla needs to convince the more aggressive members of the council, like the Carter. So he's forcing the issue. He's sending a probe. Aris pulled up a map on a tablet. It showed a pastoral landscape in a part of the world once known as France. The Somme Valley, he said quietly. Site of one of the bloodiest battles in our planet's history. Over 1 million casualties in 1916. The psychic residue there is denser. The Varani probe is designed to withstand extreme conditions. It's going to land right in the middle of Typeval Wood and take a direct measurement of the mnemonic resonance. He wants to stick a thermometer into hell, Sam murmured, understanding dawning. Precisely, Evans said. And he wants a human there as a control subject. He specifically requested you. Sam stared at her. Number, absolutely not. I am not going to be some lab rat for an alien I've never met. Sam, listen, Aris pleaded, his scientific curiosity warring with his compassion. This could be our only chance. Zyla thinks this power is a constant, a measurable force like gravity. But we don't think it is. We think it's passive, an echo unless it's disturbed. Unless someone like you, a nexus, is there to amplify it. If you are there, they won't just get a reading, they might get a demonstration. A demonstration of what happens when you try to quantify sorrow. You want me to weaponize my daughter's memory, Sam said, the words tasting like ash. You want me to use my pain to scare them. We want you to show them the truth, Evans insisted, her voice rising with passion. That this isn't a weapon. It's the price we pay for love, for connection. It's the ghost in our machine. They need to understand that you can't disarm a memory. You can't put a leash on grief. If they wall us up, they're just creating a pressure cooker. But if they see the true nature of it, the sheer, uncontrollable, non-malicious power of it, Trevor, maybe they'll just leave us alone, out of respect. Or fear, I don't care which. Sam looked back at Lily's photograph. Her smiling face, the missing tooth, the simple, uncomplicated joy of that moment. What had this all come to? Her beautiful short life, her painful death, reduced to a geopolitical bargaining chip. The thought was obscene, but then he felt it again. The faint whispers from beyond his room, the collective quiet sadness of all the people in the base in the world, each one carrying their own losses, their own ghosts. His grief wasn't just his. It was a drop in an ocean the Varoni were about to sail a boat into. Maybe Evans was right. Maybe the only way to make them understand the ocean was to show them a tidal wave. All right, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I'll go. I'll be the lab rat. He picked up Lily's photo and slipped it into his pocket. If he was going to hell, he was bringing his angel with him. The field in France was beautiful. It was late autumn, and the trees that ringed the quiet meadow were shedding leaves of gold and rust. A gentle mist clung to the ground. It was hard to believe that this peaceful place had once been a charnel house, a landscape of mud wire and death. But the feeling was there. Sam felt it the moment he stepped out of the transport. It was different from the Wanderer. The ship's grief had been sharp, technological, contained. This was older, deeper. A sorrow that had soaked into the very soil. A dull, permanent ache that resonated up through the soles of his shoes. A temporary command post had been set up on the edge of the wood. Director Evans was there, along with Aris and a team of technicians. They all looked tense, their faces pale in the grey morning light. Sam was fitted with a biomonitor headset. "The Varani probe is on final approach," Aris said, his fingers flying over a console. "It will land in the center of the clearing. They want you to approach it, Sam. They'll be monitoring your vitals, your neural activity, and the ambient resonance." "And what am I supposed to do?" Sam asked, pulling his jacket tighter. The air was cold, but the chill he felt was deeper than that. "Nothing," Aris said. "Just be there, be you." A silver teardrop descended from the overcast sky, silent and graceful. The Varani probe. It was about the size of a car, its surface seamless and reflective, distorting the peaceful image of the trees and sky. It settled onto the damp grass without a sound, a piece of alien perfection in a deeply wounded human place. "It's landed," a technician reported. "They're activating their scanners." "Go now, Sam," Evans ordered, her voice tight. Sam took a breath and started walking. With every step toward the probe, the ache in the earth grew stronger. It was a chorus of millions of voices, not whispering last words, but crying out in a single unified lament. It was the grief of nations, the sorrow of a lost generation. He felt the shock of boys going over the top of a trench, the terror of the shelling, the slow, lonely death in a muddy crater. He felt the heartbreak of the mothers and sweethearts who waited for letters that would never come. The world around him began to shimmer. The green field was overlaid with a spectral grey, pockmarked with shell holes. The ghosts of skeletal trees clawed at the sky. He could hear the faint, rhythmic thunder of artillery, a sound that came from 100 years ago. He reached into his pocket and took out the photo of Lily. He looked at her smiling face. His own grief, raw and personal, rose up to meet the vast, ancient sorrow of the battlefield. It was a drop of ink falling into a glass of water. His love for his daughter, the black hole of her absence. It became the focal point, the lens. The diffuse, ambient pain of the Somme suddenly had a name, Lily. It had a face. It had a story. In his mind, he wasn't in a field in France anymore. He was in the hospital room. He was holding Lily's tiny, cool hand. He was watching the light fade from her eyes. He was feeling that ultimate, universe-ending moment of loss. And through him, the million ghosts of the Somme felt it too. Their collective, century-old pain found a fresh voice, a new reason to weep. The ache became a scream. Aboard the Varani flagship, thousands of light years away, Ambassador Zyla watched his sensor readings. The ambient mnemonic resonance at the site was high, as expected. Then the human Weller approached the probe. The readings began to climb, then they went off the scale. "What is happening?" Zen asked, his holographic form flickering. "The human is acting as an amplifier," Zyla stated, his logical mind struggling to process the data. "He is harmonizing with the local resonance, focusing it." On the screen, the probe's external camera showed the man holding a small square. Then the data feed dissolved into pure noise, not static. Noise. The probe's AI, a being of pure Varani logic, was transmitting a single, repeating paradoxical concept. Infinite loss contained within a finite moment. Then came the wave. It wasn't energy, it wasn't radiation. It was feeling, raw, undiluted. It washed out from the probe, broadcast across the Varani network, a psychic shockwave, traveling faster than light through their comms system. Zyla felt it. For the first time in his engineered existence, he felt the love for a child he'd never had. He felt the agony of watching that child die. He felt the bottomless grief of a father, multiplied by the sorrow of 1,000,000 dead sons. His perfect, logical mind fractured. The universe, which had always been a series of predictable equations, suddenly became a meaningless, howling vortex of pain. He didn't scream. Varani were incapable of screaming. He simply stood, his mind shattered by a second-hand emotion, as the serene lights of his office flickered and died, plunging him into a darkness filled with the ghost of a little girl and the weeping of an army. The probe had not just taken a measurement, it had opened a door, and something terrible and sad had walked through. Back on Earth, the world did not end, it just shuddered. Sam stood before the silent probe, the photo of Lily clutched in his hand, tears streaming down his face. He was crying for his daughter. He was crying for the boys who died in the mud. He was crying because for the first time, the crushing weight of his grief felt shared, understood by 1,000,000 silent souls. The spectral overlay of the battlefield faded. The ghostly sounds of war receded, leaving only the sighing of the wind in the trees. The ache in the earth subsided, returning to its dormant, sorrowful hum. The storm had passed. "Sam, Mr. Weller, can you hear me?" It was Eris's voice, tinny and panicked in his earpiece. "Sam, what happened?" All our senses went blind for 30 seconds. The probe is completely inert. Sam wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He felt empty, drained, but also lighter, as if he had just wept out a year's worth of unshed tears. "I am okay," he said, his voice raspy. I think they got their reading." He looked at the silver teardrop. It was no longer a thing of perfection. It looked dull now, tarnished. A faint crack, like a spiderweb in glass, had appeared on its seamless surface. He had a sudden certain feeling that whatever mind had lived inside that metal shell was gone. Its circuits fried by an emotion it was never designed to compute. He walked back to the command post. Evans and Eris stared at him as if he were a ghost himself. "What did you feel?" Evans demanded, her usual composure gone, replaced by a raw, naked awe. "Everything," Sam said simply. He sat down heavily on a supply crate. "It wasn't an attack. It wasn't a weapon. It was a conversation." He looked at his hands. They wanted to measure our grief. So I showed them mine and the field. It showed them its, all of it, focused on one point. It was too much for them. The geopolitical fallout was instantaneous and seismic. The Varani probe hadn't just broadcast its catastrophic overload to Zyla's flagship. The signal had echoed through the entire Galactic Council comms network. Every species connected to the net got a piece of it. For species like the Karthar, who understood honor and fury, but not lingering sorrow, the brief, concentrated blast of human grief was utterly disorienting. Murtho warships on patrol near the Sol system reported mass hallucinations among their crews, pilots weeping for people they'd never met, for losses that weren't theirs. For crystalline beings like the Zolotians, whose consciousness was based on flawless patterns, the illogical paradox of love and loss was like a computer virus. Dozens of Zolosian ships and stations suffered catastrophic systems failures as their own AI caretakers were driven insane. For the Puldorians, whose gelatinous forms were highly empathic, the wave was a psychic tsunami. On their homeworld, thousands of miles from the source, they experienced a sorrowful, a spontaneous, shared depression that brought their entire society to a standstill for a full day. The galaxy was in chaos. Not the chaos of war, but the chaos of confusion and profound existential horror. Humanity hadn't fired a shot. They had sighed, and the galaxy had caught a cold in its soul. The narrative shifted overnight. Humanity was no longer seen as a belligerent upstart with dangerous toys. They were something far more frightening. They were carriers. They were a species whose very existence was a psychic environmental hazard. The demand for disarmament died a quiet, sudden death. Who cared about torpedoes and laser cannons when a single human's memory could shatter the mind of a Varani logician and make a Qatar warrior weep? The debate was no longer about taking humanity's weapons. It was about what to do with humanity itself. Back in the French meadow, as technicians in hazmat suits cautiously surrounded the dead Varani probe, Sam sat by himself, watching the mist burn off the fields. He finally understood. The power wasn't in their fists or their fleets. It was in their hearts. It was the messy, painful, beautiful, and terrifying baggage they carried through life. It was the price of a short existence filled with intense connections. You can't love without the risk of loss. You can't have Lily without the grief of Lily. They were two sides of the same coin, and humanity had just shown the galaxy that coin. And the galaxy, it seemed, had no idea how to make change. The galactic scream eventually subsided into a terrified whisper. The council convened an emergency session, but the tone was radically different. The blustering threats from the Qatar were gone, replaced by a wary, unnerved silence. The Zolosian delegate, a newly formed crystal, refused to even look at the human representative screen. The Puldorian emissary wobbled anxiously, shrouded in a protective dampening field. The star of the show, however, was Ambassador Sylar. His holographic image appeared before the council, but he was changed. His Varani perfection was gone. His light form flickered intermittently, and his synthesized voice, once a smooth monotone, now carried a strange, discordant resonance, like a cracked bell. He had felt grief, and it had permanently corrupted his flawless logic. The initiative to disarm the human species is withdrawn, he announced, the statement landing with the force of a physical blow. It is predicated on a fundamental misunderstanding of the threat. We sought to remove their teeth, unaware that their breath is poison. He played a recording for the council, not of the chaos, but of the source. He showed them the data from the SOM, the spectral images of soldiers, the telemetry of the probe's AI as it encountered the concept of infinite loss in a finite moment. He showed them the psychic shockwave as it spread, not as an attack, but as an uncontrolled expanding wave of pure emotion. Humanity does not wield this power, Zeller explained, his flickering form a testament to his words. They are this power. It is an intrinsic part of their biological and psychological makeup. The capacity for individual emotional attachment is unlike anything we have encountered. Their bonds are intensely strong, and when they are severed by their short lifespans, the resulting psychic backlash is significant. He paused, and for a moment, the entire council chamber was silent. contemplating the alien concept of a broken heart. Their history is not a record of events, Zyla continued. It is a landscape of scars. Every war, every plague, every personal tragedy leaves a wound that does not heal. It festers. They build monuments on these sites, places of remembrance. We believed this was a quaint, primitive ritual. We were wrong. They are containing the fallout. These memorials are psychic radiation shields, and we, in our ignorance, asked them to open the reactor core. The Khanthara ambassador, a grizzled old warrior named Court, rumbled. So, they are too dangerous to disarm, and too dangerous to leave armed. What do you propose, Varoni? That we simply run and hide. Running is a logical option, Zyla replied, his cracked voice unnerving the warrior. Hiding is also logical. My proposal is a variation of this. I once advocated for a quarantine, a wall to keep them in. I now see the flaw in that logic. A wall implies a prison. It implies aggression. It implies aggression. It will only create more pressure, more resentment, more of the very emotional trauma we seek to avoid. Number. The solution is not a quarantine. It is a cordon sanitaire, a buffer zone. He brought up a map of the galaxy. He drew a circle around the Sol system and its few fledgling colonies, a vast sphere of empty space, hundreds of light years across. We declare this region the human exclusion zone, Zyla proposed. No travel in, no travel out except by their own volition. We cease all contact. We remove all observation posts. We treat their portion of space not as a cage, but as a nature preserve for a creature we do not understand and cannot safely interact with. We leave them completely and utterly alone. A murmur went through the assembled delegates. It was a radical idea. To simply cede a massive portion of the Orion arm to a single species and pretend it didn't exist. They will expand within this zone, Ambassador Court argued. Let them, Zyla said. Their expansion is slow. Their grief is fast. Let them contend with their own ghosts in their own backyard. Our interference, our attempts to manage them, have been the catalyst for every major incident. The Epsilon event was triggered by our demands, the Wanderer incident by our observers, the Somme cascade by our probe. The evidence is clear. The most dangerous thing for us is proximity to them. The safest course of action is to give them space, a great deal of space. The logic, twisted as it was by Zyla's newfound trauma, was undeniable. The galaxy wasn't afraid of a human invasion. It was afraid of catching humanity's sadness. It was afraid of the ghost that lived behind their eyes. The vote was almost unanimous. They would pull back. They would erect cosmic warning signs at the edge of the zone. Here be dragons, was the old human phrase. The new signs would be more direct. Here be humans. Do not enter. Risk of existential sorrow. The galaxy wasn't just disarming humanity. It was disarming itself of humanity. The summons came for Sam again. This time, there was no black transport or armed guards. A single, unmarked sedan picked him up from the Nevada base. The driver was a young man in a simple suit, who called him Sir and said nothing else. They drove him not to a military installation, but to a quiet civilian spaceport. A ship was waiting. Small, elegant, unarmed. Where are we going? Sam asked. Epsilon Station, the young man said. The Council has requested a final meeting to sign the treaty. The treaty. The Cordon Sanitaire Accords, the man clarified. They've requested a specific kind of delegate from our side, not a soldier, not a politician. Sam understood. They didn't want to talk to the people who built the guns. They wanted to talk to the gun. He was the sole passenger on the flight. He spent the time staring out at the starfield, the photo of Lily safely in his pocket. He felt strangely calm. The constant, low-level hum of shared human sadness was still there, a part of him now, but it no longer felt like a burden. It just felt like company. Epsilon Station had been repaired. The negotiation chamber was pristine. The shattered crystal of the Elosian delegate and the organic stains of the Poldorian long since scrubbed away. But the room felt haunted all the same. This time the aliens weren't there in person. They appeared as holograms, shimmering and distant. Seated around the great table, they looked like gods or demons from a storybook. All except one. Ambassador Sila's image was still cracked and flickering, a wounded ghost at the feast. Sam walked in, wearing the simple clothes he'd been given, gray slacks and a dark sweater. He looked like what he was, a tired, middle-aged man who had lost his child. He took the seat at the head of the table, the one General Administrator Thorne had occupied. The silence was heavy. Zyla's hologram turned toward him. "Samuel Weller," the Varani's distorted voice intoned. The other delegates shifted uncomfortably. They were looking at the man whose grief had broken their colleagues and sent a wave of psychic misery across the galaxy. "We have come to an agreement," Zyla said. "Humanity will be left to itself. We will withdraw. We will post warnings. We will not interfere again. We ask for only one thing in return." "What's that?" Sam asked, his voice quiet but clear in the silent room. "An explanation," Zyla said. "From you. Not from your leaders or your scientists. From you. Help us understand. This brew power, this grief, why do you hold on to it? Why do you build monuments to it? Why do you let it fester? A logical species would excise such a painful, destructive force from its psyche." Sam looked at the assembly of alien holograms. Beings of crystal and gas and chitin and pure logic. They were ancient, powerful, wise in the ways of stars and physics. But they were children in the ways of the heart. He didn't give them a speech about geopolitics or psychic resonance. He just told them a story. "I had a daughter," he began, and he saw the Cathar hologram flinch. "Her name was Lily. She liked the smell of strawberries. She played the piano badly. She had a laugh that, well, it was the best sound in the world. When she got sick, we did everything we could. The doctors, the machines, all the science we have, and we lost. She died, and my world ended." He paused, taking a breath. The room was utterly still. "You ask why we hold on to the grief," he continued, his voice thick with emotion but steady. "You don't understand. The grief isn't a separate thing. It's the other side of the love. The hole she left in my life is shaped exactly like her. The pain I feel is the echo of the joy she gave me. If I were to excise the grief, I would have to excise the memory of her. I would have to forget her laugh. I would have to forget the smell of strawberries, the feel of her hand in mine. And I would rather my soul be shattered every day for the rest of my life than forget her for a single second." He looked directly at Zyla's flickering image. "We build monuments. We tell stories. We remember our dead not to fester in the pain, but to honor the love that created it. This power you are so afraid of, it's not a weapon, it's a testament. It's the proof that we lived, and we loved, and we lost, and that it all mattered. You can't disarm it. You can't quarantine it. It's the price of being human, and it's a price we are willing to pay." He reached into his pocket and placed the small, framed photo of Lily on the table. The image of the smiling, gap-toothed girl looked up at the silent council of alien gods. "Her name was Lily," he said again softly. For a long time, no one spoke. The flickering of Zyla's hologram seemed to intensify. He had wanted a logical explanation. He had been given a poem. He had asked for a schematic. He had been shown a human heart. And he finally, logically understood. They could never defeat a species whose greatest power was also its greatest vulnerability. They could never win a war against an enemy who drew its strength from its own wounds. "The accords are signed," Zila said, his voice softer now, the discordance almost gone. "Go home, Samuel Weller. Go home and remember your daughter." The holograms faded out, one by one, leaving Sam alone in the great room with the ghost of his little girl. The trip back to Earth was quiet. Sam slept for most of it, a deep and dreamless sleep, unlike any he'd had in over a year. He landed, not at a military base or a sterile government facility, but at a public spaceport in his home state. The young man in the suit who had been his escort handed him a small data chip. "Your back pay and a pension," the man said, "from a grateful government." "I don't want it," Sam said. "It's not a request, sir," the man said, a faint smile on his lips. "It's a testament." He nodded respectfully and disappeared into the crowd. Sam Weller was a civilian again. He took a public transport shuttle back to his small town. Nothing had changed. The houses were the same. The trees were the same. The news on the public screens was full of the miracle of Epsilon, the sudden, inexplicable peace with the Galactic Council. Pundits were calling it a masterstroke of human diplomacy. They had no idea. He walked up the path to his front door. He could feel the silence waiting for him inside, but it was different now. It wasn't an oppressive, heavy thing anymore. It was just quiet, a space to be filled. He went inside. The house was clean, just as he'd left it. He walked to the mantelpiece where the photo of Lily had once sat. The space was empty. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the frame. He looked at her smiling face for a long moment, then placed it back in its rightful spot. He stood there waiting for the familiar, crushing wave of grief to hit him. It didn't come. The sadness was still there, a permanent part of his landscape like a mountain range on the horizon. But it no longer blotted out the sun. It was just a part of the view. He went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. The real kind, not the synthesized stuff from the base. As it brewed, filling the house with a rich, warm smell, he found himself humming. It was a simple, clumsy melody, the one Lily used to play on the piano. He hummed it all the way through. He didn't cry. He almost smiled. The news broke a week later. The Galactic Council had officially withdrawn to the borders of the new human exclusion zone. All trade, all communication, all contact had ceased. Humanity was alone in its corner of the cosmos. There were riots in some of the colony worlds, protests from corporations who had lost access to alien markets. But for most people, a strange sense of peace settled over the human worlds. The great galactic other was gone. The pressure was off. They were left to their own devices, to deal with their own problems, their own history, their own ghosts. Sam didn't pay much attention. He was busy. He went back to his old job at the local orbital repair dock. He fixed things. Life support systems, navigation arrays, coffee machines. He was good with his hands. He found a simple satisfaction in making broken things work again. Sometimes when he was working on a quiet station, staring out at the earth below, he would feel it. the quiet hum of humanity, the great, sad, beautiful symphony of 7 billion souls, each loving and losing and remembering. He would feel the echo of his own daughter, not as a sharp pain, but as a soft, warm chord in that symphony. The Galactic Council had demanded disarmament. They had come seeking to take away humanity's weapons, their ships, their lasers. And in the end, humanity had shown them true power. It wasn't in their technology. It was in their tears. It was the simple, terrifying, undisarmable truth that for a human, to love something is to make a ghost that will haunt the universe forever. Sam Weller finished his coffee and looked at his daughter's picture on the mantel. He could almost smell strawberries, and for the first time in a very long time, it made him smile. The silence in the house was finally, truly gone.